Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's workshop on the impact of the ISO 20022 on African Banker, organized by StoneX in partnership with African Banker magazine. My name is Pedro. I'm working for African Banker magazine. With no further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first speaker of the day. Her name is Beatrice Pesh. She is the head of correspondent banking for StoneX, and Beatrice will going to give us a bit of an overview of today's workshop and what we're going to discuss today. Beatrice, welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Some of you may have met my team or myself, or everyone else. My name is Beatrice Pesh, and I manage the correspondent banking team for StoneX in the EMEA region. So today, StoneX and his technology team has decided to deliver a short webinar on ISO 20022 and to walk you through the challenges that will face the financial industry in the coming months. It is important for our correspondent bank partner to understand what those changes are going to be and the consequences of moving from empty messages onto ISO messages. Obviously, there'll be some disruption. It'll be a positive or negative disruption, but you need to understand this for your institution. I want to stress, my team wants to stress, our business wants to stress that it's very important for our partnered bank to be ready, because we rely on you to support our business and to support the cross-border payments that we perform through your institution all over the world for our aid and development clients, for our corporate clients, or financial institution clients. So without any more delay, I will pass it on to David, who will walk you through this short webinar, and I hope it will be useful for you and your institution. Thank you very, very much. David, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining. If you were to Google ISO 20022, you would find a lot of information. And I would suggest that you probably would find too much information and that it would be quite hard to make sense of all this information. So the purpose of this webinar is just to cut through the noise and simply explain what is ISO 20022, what are the key dates for the Swift migration, how will it affect your institution, and what do you need to do by when. As has been said already, if there are any questions, please submit it in the Q&A. If we run out of time at the end, we will be sure to get in touch with you directly, so please don't hesitate with your questions. Chandu, if we can move to the next slide, please. So just for context, I'd like to very briefly explain what ISO 20022 is. It's a new financial standard for payments and cash management. And there are many financial standards in use today. For example, many of you may be familiar, in fact, you are familiar with ISO 15022, which is Swift's fin standards, like the MT103. ISO 20022 is an open and freely available standard, which is intended to replace and unify a multitude of existing and disparately used standards all over the world today. It's basically a common language for payments and cash management, which will enable faster and more efficient payment processing. The standard is in the limelight now because Swift is asking its community to switch over to it by this year, but it's not strictly new. It's been around for many years. Chandu, previous slide, please. It's not actually new. It's been around for quite a number of years already, and it's in use in certain jurisdictions and between certain organizations. For example, it's the standard that underpins European SEPA payments. And many RTGS and ACH systems are already powered by ISO 20022. And in the coming years, more and more financial authorities and regulators will be upgrading their local domestic infrastructure to this standard as well. So why are they doing this? Well, ISO 20022 brings a range of business benefits and will improve support for things like end-to-end payments, which will assist with payment status queries, automation and straight-through processing, or STP, to lower operational costs, transparency to assist with compliance, and data enrichment to obtain richer customer insights. So as a customer, you will enjoy more remittance information carried through your payment instructions, making reconciliation much easier. If you're a risk or compliance manager, ISO 20022 will give you more assurance that your screening and testing practices are effective. And as a business manager, you'll discover much more customer insights and business intelligence, which can inform your own product roadmap. All of this is great, but it comes with the price of IT and operational change, which introduces risk. And so this migration could have a major operational impact if not carefully planned for. Chandu, next slide, please. So what are the key dates and what do you need to do by when? ISO 20022 goes live in November 2022, just 8 months away. In order to use this, you must have the latest version of Swift Alliance installed. If you're running your own Swift infrastructure, this is something that you need to do yourselves, or if you're connecting through a third party like a service bureau, please make sure you contact your bureau and ensure they are using the latest version of Swift Alliance. Between November of 2022 and November of 2025, Swift will support both FIN and ISO messages in what is being called the coexistence period. In November 2025, Swift will retire the FIN MT1 series, 2 series, and 9 series messages. So after November 2025, if you try to send an MT103 or an MT940, it will simply be rejected by Swift, and you will instead need to send an ISO equivalent message. Now, some of you might take away from this that the migration deadline is November 2025, but that's not quite right. And that's because there's a very important distinction between sending messages and receiving messages. For sending messages, you have until 2025 to switch to ISO. And this is because you are in control of which messages you send. But this is not the case for receiving messages. You're not in control of which messages your counterparties may send you. And as from November 2022, any of your counterparties could send you an ISO message. So the key date by which you have to have a solution in place is November 2022. Just for reference, according to a Swift survey, more than 50% of all payments and cash management traffic, i.e. FIN MT1s, 2s, and 9s, Swift are projecting to be based on ISO from the go live date. So it's highly likely that you'll receive ISO messages from the go live dates. So how will this impact your back office operation? Well, most Swift connected banks are on STP today, whereby Swift messages, be they sent or received, are integrated with their core banking applications. So you should be aiming to do exactly the same thing under an ISO standard. If you're not already running mostly STP, please contact us. We can certainly help you there too. But one of the key dependencies for ISO is whether your core banking system can support ISO messages. If you haven't already inquired with your application vendors, please do so as soon as possible. You may also want to begin contacting your key correspondents and asking them about their own plans to adopt and start using ISO. Just to share our experience with you, having spoken to many banks already, some vendors are ready to support it today, and others are working on supporting it in a future release. But the most common feedback we've got from our customers and partners is that the application vendor is ready to support ISO 20022, but it requires the customers to upgrade to a new version first. If this applies to you, you'll know that upgrading your core banking application is arguably an even more delicate project, which has to be very carefully planned ahead for. So unless you already have a plan in place, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to formulate a plan and execute that plan prior to November. So a temporary solution to support ISO by the November deadline will likely be required. In any event, please contact your vendor and inquire about their readiness, and if there are any prerequisites which apply to you, such as a mandatory version upgrade. Please also be aware that there are multiple versions of ISO 20022, and it could be that your application vendor or your counterparties are using different versions than you have ready. Now, most of the banks we've spoken to, as explained earlier, are not fully ready. Their applications are not fully ready, and they need to find another solution before November. If this applies to you, then you have to address two key challenges. The first challenge is translations. So to continue running STP, you will need to find a way to translate the ISO messages you receive into FIN messages, as these can then be routed to your core banking application automatically, just like it does today. Again, this needs to be in place by November 2022 to ensure you avoid any potential disruption. If you don't have any solution in place, then what will happen is your received messages will jump into your Swift terminals into a queue, and these will basically need to be processed and handled manually, which will likely take a number of hours and, depending on your volume, potentially days. The second challenge is with regards to truncation. Now, because the ISO standard is a much richer standard, and it can contain a lot more information than the FIN message. When you're translating an ISO message into a FIN message, you're going to lose some data. This is called data truncation. So not all of the data will fit into a translated FIN message. For compliance purposes, you need to be able to screen the original ISO 20022 message. It's not sufficient for you to simply screen the translated FIN message. And also, if you're an intermediary in the payments, you will also have to follow the travel rule, i.e. you need to be able to pass on that message in ISO format too. In summary, this slide contains the key information that you really need to know and cuts through the noise. And I hope that it's highlighted the importance of planning ahead. For customers whose core banking systems will not be completely ready by November to support ISO and who require an alternative solution, our StoneX messaging hub, or XMH, will likely be of interest. And I'd like to just spend a few minutes explaining how. Chandu, next slide, please. So using XMH's ISO converter, banks can comply with the ISO 20022 migration fully without having to make any changes to their back office environment or performing any upgrades on their core banking system. Our ISO converter is suitable as a short-term tactical solution, for example, pending a new upgrade, or as a long-term strategic solution, either or. It addresses the key translation challenges, including supporting the complete suite of messages. It supports both ISO to FIN conversions for receiving messages, and also FIN to ISO conversions if you want to start sending ISO messages as well. It has flexibility to handle message variations, be they version variations or bank variations. It has automated real-time alerting for translation errors, so you could detect those in real time. It accommodates runtime mapping capability, which is basically a means of enabling new flows to be implemented very quickly. API services for scalability, support for the travel rule, and optionally, it includes an integrated compliance solution. So if your sanction screening vendor is not capable of supporting ISO messages, we can also help here. XMH is also more than just a translation engine. It delivers a user-friendly and standard presentation of your payments, irrespective of the source or destination formats. Basically, it hides the complexity of ISO 20022 and makes a payment look like a payment. It contains extensive messaging processing capabilities like debulking, duplicate detection, hold and release functions, encryptions, and many more. It handles the richer business process flow supported by ISO. So it's not just that the data is richer, but the payment status now allows for many more response options than FIN messages do today. And finally, it includes fully integrated GPI supports. Commercially, we provide clear, concise, and flexible terms to suit your needs. And last but not least, XMH is a proprietary StoneX technology developed by StoneX from the ground up, and we are using this technology in-house ourselves. And because many of the challenges that we face are the same challenges faced by you, our partner banks, it was designed with customers in mind. Chandu, next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to Chandu, who will take you through a very brief demo of the XMH system and showcase a few live translation examples. Chandu, over to you.
Thanks, David. So just to give an introduction, my name is Chandu. I take care of the StoneX Messaging Hub product, and also looking forward to introduce you to this product, which can mitigate some of the scenarios or challenges that you have today with the incoming ISO 20022 migration part of it. So some of the scenarios that we are going to showcase, we thought that it is best to showcase some of the products also. So here you see that XMH has got the capability to transform and translate any kind of an incoming message, whether be it a PAIN message, which is a ISO messages, to a MT103 format, or a MT103 format to an ISO format, either ways, both ways. And also, apart from the Swift messages, XMH also supports a non-standard formats, be it ACH formats, or whether be it a JSON format, or whether be it an Excel format. So XMH has got a capability to support all kinds of formats that are required by the bank, which is also non-standard to converting them to an MT or a ISO format, both ways. So let me take you through the application right now. Yeah. XMH has got a very intuitive dashboards here. So it is self-explanatory, and in case any additional information is required, we can plug in very easily as far as the dashboard is concerned. And also, and also here in this case, whenever there is a incoming message that is coming in, the dashboard gives you a process as to where exactly the message is and what is happening with the particular message, be it whether an inbound message or whether the translation or validation that is happening, and also in terms of the processing, the transformation, the whole journey part of it is in a dashboard. So here you see there are various kinds of messages that are incoming. That is for XMH, whether be it a ISO, which is incoming pain messages, or whether it is an empty format, or whether it is a non-standard format, which can be an Excel, or it can be a PDF, or it can be a ACH format. Any kind of a format, CSV kind of format, can be accepted within the application. And here you see that whenever there is a message which is incoming, you can see the message that is incoming. And also, once it is accepted, it goes to a layer called a core, which accepts the message and also ensures that the message is translated in a very common message format, which is very readable format. And this is something which will help XMH to transform any kind of a format that we get, any kind of a payment message or a statement message that we get, into converting that into any neutral format. This is a neutral format. It converts that very easily to any of the non-standard or a standard format, which could be a empty format, or it could be a ISO format, or it could be a Excel format, or any of these formats. So this becomes very easy. This particular neutral format conversion becomes very easy for us. So subsequently, we also have an outgoing, which is the end result of the transformation process. Here in this case, what we also do is whenever there is an incoming message, we also make sure that the dashboards are self-explanatory here. And it also gives very detailed amount of information as to what are the kinds of transaction that has processed, what has gone into error, what has gone into a delivered, which is the end user, and also the ACNAC message statuses. And also, as David mentioned, this the XMH is completely integrated with GPI, and the ACNAC messages completely show that capability in terms of GPI also. And in terms of viewing the message at any point in time, you can view this message. You can see that this particular message, which was a pain 001 message, has got translated to pain 001 and a different version number. So this is another challenge that we always have, that Swift always has got multiple versions, and it also depends on what version of ISO or the message formats that are required to be processed. So if you see that whenever there is a message that is coming in, you see that there is a MT103 format has got converted to a ISO pack 008 format, or whether be it an incoming message and as it has got transformed to a Fedwire or a local currency or a ACH format. Okay, if I just it is a Fedwire. See here, you see that it is a MT103 and it has got translated to a non-Swift format, which is a Fedwire. Or similarly, it could be also be a NACHA format or any of the custom formats that you might be required, ACH formats. So effectively, what XMH does is XMH supports all kinds of possible format conversion here, similar to the Swift standards. And in addition to the standard format conversions, whether be it from ACH format or a MT103 format or a PAX or a PAIN format, XMH also handles a non-standard format conversions. That is your PAIN format to MT103, which is usually not supported by a Swift conversion or a transformation engine, or it could also do a translation to a local clearing or a ACH format. So quite comprehensive. And given the scenario, and also in terms of statements, we also support CAMT messages. We also see that there are messages where we support from CAMT to MT 940 or a 950. We also have a cash position format where at any point in time you can query on multiple accounts that you might have, and you can query based on a currency, or it can be based on an account. So quite very elaborate tools that are given as part of the application format. So here, this is something which we built right from ground up, so that we know that the kind of issues that ISO transformation is going to bring in. So, and also we know that the kind of changes that are required to our core systems to make sure that we isolate these kind of changes in the market. We brought in this as a product by itself. So that's a brief intro.
Thank you very much. I think I would ask you both to perhaps put your cameras on, because I can imagine there are a couple of questions that we have to run through. If you can both join me. First of all, thank you very much. I'm sure everyone is finding this very valuable. And when we first asked everyone to join us today, we had the opportunity to for people to ask their questions, to pose their questions in regards to today's workshop. And we selected 7 questions that hopefully we can run through together, and hopefully clarify any sort of doubts, queries that all our banks have. So, David, perhaps if I can start with you, and in relation to everything that you just mentioned today, one of the questions from one of our customers was, what's sort of the central bank's position in regards to the new ISO 20022 for their real-time gross settlement systems? What can you tell us about this?
Thanks, Pedro. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, there is no uniform central bank position on ISO 20022. In our experience, they are all aware of it. In many circumstances, the regulator is encouraging a unified national approach. So please do get in contact with your central bank representative to discuss this with them. They could have some valuable information for you. But many have announced their intention, if they're not already doing so, to move to ISO 20022. Like I said earlier, a number are already using it, such as like the SEPA standard is underpinned by ISO 20022. And in the coming years, you'll see more and more organically move over to this new standard as part of their technology refresh.
Right. Okay. So the key message is really so we ensure that we are able to move to these new standards. And one second question that I think that was asked by more than one bank that is here today is in regards to sort of the Swift Alliance Access release, the 7.6, and does it support both the MT as well as the ISO 20022 messages? How does it work exactly?
Yeah, so another great question. So in order to support ISO 20022 to use it, you have to be using the latest version of Swift Alliance or whatever equivalent you may be running. So the answer is yes, it supports both, but this does require you to be running the latest version, or for your service bureau or third party who is managing this for you to be running it on your behalf. And if anyone has any particular questions on that, be happy to take that separately.
Okay, fantastic. And Chando, perhaps now to you as well, that you can hopefully clarify some other key issues. One is in terms of the functionalities and the change of ISO 20022 message and the relation with the bank's core banking system. So are there any upgrade systems that need to take place? And if so, how can the new XMH help? Can you walk us through all this, please?
Sure, thanks. So XMH would support the translation of a MT to ISO format as per Swift standards and the requirements. And also the roadmap for the XMH would include an ongoing message format version upgrades. And that is in line with the prescribed Swift messaging, Swift requirements. So which means to say the Swift as and when they require the message upgrades or the version upgrades, we will automatically have that as part of our XMH roadmap. And this would
Okay.
insulate the XMH customers to avoid any changes to their core banking system or any of their system that is sending the messages via XMH system. So that way we isolate the customers.
Okay, very interesting. And because David, in this presentation, we was talking about perhaps some of the different challenges, and one we mentioned was, so what happens exactly if there is a truncation of a message? How can we manage this situation, Chandu, on a very practical level? Chandu, I'm not sure if, I think you are on mute. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So can you repeat the question?
Yes, so we were looking at that when David was mentioning some of the key challenges, and one of the questions that we always have was what happens if there is a truncation of a message, and how do you manage this situation?
Okay, very good question. That is a challenging situation that we are seeing that is coming in terms of an MT to ISO to a MT conversion process. Because in case of an incoming ISO message conversion to a MT format, there are possibilities of message truncation due to MT format standards. And in such scenarios, XMH has parameters to either alert, reject, or hold the transactions, which are parameterized again, till a decision is taken based on the ISO message, and a decision is taken. So in addition to XMH provides very easy to use comparison between the original and the translated message to help take a decision on further handling of the message. So it could either be, it could also be to a hold of a message or to reject the message. Finally, we give based on a parameterization, and also ensure that in case of an STP, you can always parameterize it, and the system can actually take a route, a rule engine based on these parameters. So very interesting and a very challenging situation, and it is very practical.
Okay, very interesting. And I think this sort of relates a little bit, David. We just received a question now live from the chat, and I'm going just to quote straight ahead, and it says, we from one of the listeners says, we understand that Swift is providing the info translation services, and which will allow receivers that can process his MT if they're not ready for a new ISO. So how does exactly the solution provided by StoneX differs from that of Swift in this relation? What can you tell us, David?
Yes, thank you, Pedro. So Swift is providing a, for want of a better word, a basic solution to help the community members manage this complex migration. I'd say that there are a few key differences. Obviously, so I think the main difference is that Swift's inflow translator will be one-way only, so it will help customers with receipt of ISO messages to FIN, as in it doesn't support FIN to ISO. So it's one way only. I think the second key part there is that it doesn't cover the comprehensive list of message flows. So there is a very decent chance that some messages that you may be receiving are not in scope of this inflow translation. So these messages that are received will not be automatically translated. I think those are the two key messages I think that are really the difference between our solution and Swift's solution. That being said, absolutely go to swift.com and find more information about what they could do. But earlier I also spoke about how our ISO converter is not just a translation engine. It delivers a range of other features and benefits like user-friendly presentation and extensive functionality like hold and release and debulking, various other things.
Okay, interesting. But are there sort of any negative impacts of the new ISO sort of in terms of its operations, or what can you tell us about that?
ISO will deliver a lot of good things from a business perspective, but ultimately Swift is mandating everyone to do this. So you've got to get on with it. And you need to be prepared from the business side and on the technology side. So on the business side, if you plan to use any of the features that are not present in Fin messages, you need to assess how you would change your operations to handle that. On the technology side, there are three things to consider. Number one, you have to upgrade your Swift Alliance system or your messaging interface, as mentioned earlier. Number two, you need to potentially upgrade your core banking solution if a version update is required. Or three, you can consider if you want to use a middleware technology like our XMH system to basically insulate your core banking system from the impact of ISO 20022.
Okay, interesting. And then something, sorry, David, one for you as well, and I think this is very very topical, especially within the African ecosystem. So since Swift is upgrading to the new ISO standards, as well as sort of the new PAPs, which is all been launched this year as well. So will banks participating in PAPs, which is a Pan-African payment system, be able to use the same platform to process Swift payments, or how does it work?
So that's an easy question for me to answer. The answer is yes.
Okay, good stuff. And I think last but not least, two very simple questions to both of you, which is one, how much this solution costs, of course, because I can imagine there are costs involved. And secondly, if people want to know more, if all the banks here present today, watching us today, want to know more, what should they do? Should they drop you an email? What's the easiest way to reach out to you guys?
Sure. So why don't I take that, Chandu? So in terms of the commercials and the costs, so cost is basically an annual subscription. So you'd sign up to an annual subscription for the service, and it is tailored to individual customers based on a number of criteria. The first is the average daily volumes that you're going to be using, the list of ISO messages that you would need to have translated that you're receiving. Also, if you want to send ISO messages, a list of messages you want to send. So I'm talking about the list of MT messages that you're using today, the number of system users, and confirmation if your sanctioned screening vendor is able to screen ISO messages. So there's 5 pieces of information that we would need. You could see our details are up on screen. So for any English-speaking partners, please do drop me an email. My colleague Sandrine, who is also on the call, she's able to assist with French sales. And our product manager, obviously Chandu, would be happy to hear from you with any questions. But if we were able to get those 5 pieces of information, we could provide you a commercial quote.
Fantastic. And perhaps, Chandu, then one last for you that is just coming live from our chat today, which is the converter, will the converter continue working after November 2025?
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, okay.
Because I was just seeing here as well. I think that's a very important question for everyone to know too.
Yeah, actually, just to jump in there, Pedro, I think it's a really good point, because I think that our ISO solution will work in perpetuity, if you like. I think this compares starkly with Swift's inflow translator, which I don't believe will continue after 2025. And on the commercial side, with regards to Swift solution, I believe it's a free service for the first year and then becomes chargeable on a yearly basis. And those charges increase up until 2025 before the migration deadline expires.
Okay, that's very important indeed. I think we already covered a lot today. I think I'm just going to check one last time if there are any sort of last questions. Again, if not, what we'll do after today's session, we'll be sending you all this information. We'll make sure as well to send you David's contact details and the team in case you need any support. If there is any sort of last words, David, Chandu, is there anything else you'd like to highlight to all our banks that are here today? We have around 90 banks here with us currently. So is there anything else that you'd like to highlight before we close today's workshop?
Sure. I mean, first of all, thank you for being such valuable partners for us. As Beatrice mentioned at the outset, we rely on you for our business. So thank you. Thank you for joining today. I think that there is just a lot of confusion and noise with respect to ISO. I hope that this webinar has helped provide the key information that you really need to know and highlighted the importance of planning ahead. Obviously, we have a solution that we think is really powerful, really easy to implement, and will really add value to your organizations if you're not in a position to support ISO out of the box. I hope it's been valuable. Please do get in touch with us if you have any questions. We'd be very happy to discuss this further with each of you. Chandu, any closing remarks?
No, thank you very much for this wonderful session, and it's been a pleasure with so many participants in this session. Would like to hear more. In case of any clarification, please do reach out. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So thank you very much as well on behalf of African Banker Magazine. And as I said, we'll be sending an email with all this information. You'll be able to see the recording of the session in case you have other questions. And again, you have the team's contact details here. So feel free to reach out to us in case of any additional queries. Again, thank you very much. And I hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you.